Hopefully all of you are doing very well and ready for today's session. So with a very warm welcome, we would like to begin our session today. So the last session for your self-learning phase is the practical webinar 2. So second practical webinar on igniting interdisciplinary STEM teaching through education for sustainable development and climate change education. So it's supposed to be real life examples from Europe based on our V4IoT project. So let me quickly introduce today's agenda. So today we will first introduce you to the purpose of the session. Why are we having this session based on a project that we have already done? Why are we introducing teaching modules that has been done by teachers today during this session? And then we will start with discussing a bit of relevance of innovating STEM teaching in the context of ESD and climate change education. And then we will very briefly explore the V4IoT teaching modules. Hopefully all of you have already seen the handbook, had a chance to read the 5 V4IoT teaching modules. We will be also sharing the link to the handbook in the chat box in case you haven't seen it. And then Josh and David from ScienceScope are here. So Josh will walk you through the data analysis practical examples, just to give you a bit of an idea of how the project took place. And also, if any of you are interested in, learning more about ScienceScope and their exploratory platform, how they work with data, weather data with teachers, then you can reach out to them. And then we'll have question and answer session and group discussion with the speakers. However, today it will be a bit different. We'll have, in a conversational format. When Adam is sharing his experience, you can already ask him questions. So, of course, as I have already mentioned, today we will have 2 speakers. Adam, he will be sharing his experience. You already know him. I assume most of you already know him. So he is a teacher, and also he was the V4IoT project coordinator, and currently he's teaching in Copernicus Upper Secondary School in Tarnobrzeg. Sorry, Adam, for my pronunciation, in Poland. And you already know Josh. He already conducted a session for the self-learning phase. So he's a software engineer at ScienceScope, and ScienceScope was the V4IoT project, our project's EdTech partner from the UK. So the purpose of the session, why are we having this session today? So by walking you through our V4IoT teaching modules and having the conversation with the coordinator and our tech partner, we want to give you an overview of existing innovative teaching practices within the SF ClassNet community developed by SF ClassNet teachers. And it will be an opportunity for you to understand the process of how these training practices were developed. So Adam will be talking more about it. And then we want to inspire you to already think about ideas for action learning phase. So for example, when we are introducing you to the different environmental modules based on different environmental topics, and also Adam is sharing his experience, Josh is showing you the data, maybe you will have an opportunity to already envision a plan to get it started for your teaching practice. And then, you can already think about environmental topics and teaching content, because when we talk about the V4IoT teaching modules, we will be also kind of sharing what were the interesting part for each module. And then, of course, you can also talk about, think about designing your student learning outcome. Adam will be talking about what was his student's learning outcome. And then, of course, when you work in a team, it's not without challenges. So Adam will be also sharing some of the challenges he faced and then how he overcame them. And of course, then from that conversation, you can already think about the kind of team structure and dynamics you want. And then he will be ending his conversation with recommendations for you. So let's first talk about STEM teaching today. Why are we connecting STEM with education for sustainable development and climate change education? As you know, we are living today in societies where technological advancements is rapid. And of course, there are various global, social, economic, political, and environmental challenges, right? So teaching STEM subject content to our students today is not enough. It has to be embedded in ongoing challenges that we are facing today. So education for sustainable development it gives us a good lens to integrate different teaching and learning elements that also help us, teach 21st century skills that are important for today's workplace. So in a way, integrating this topic helps educators make STEM interdisciplinary, and interdisciplinary teaching and learning is considered, innovative, and also considered something that helps students think innovatively and creatively to tackle global issues and to think of solutions for global issues that we are facing today. So we have already talked about this handbook briefly during our welcome session. So later, my colleagues will put the chat box to this handbook again, in case you haven't already seen it. I think let me quickly check. Okay, we some of us will post the link later. So the handbook has a bit of summary of the project's key activities and the key learning outcomes for students. And also it includes contributions by secondary school teachers, academics, and also education policymakers. And then it also, in a way, it's structured in a way that aim to inspire educators to make STEM learning more interdisciplinary, and also making it more innovative, that are connected to real world relevant challenges. So today we will very quickly explore the 5 teaching modules that are key part of this handbook. So the first one, so Adam was the team lead for this one. It's called Wind. So it tackled the weather phenomena of wind and its impact on air quality, and how wind can be used as an alternative source of energy. And the module was designed in a way where students had the chance to, use their critical thinking and creativity to assess the feasibility of setting up a wind farm in their own area. Besides that, there were other interesting elements that Adam is going to talk about, so I'll not go into more details for this module. The second one was rain. So, for this one, when you, as an educator, when you were given the topic, what do you do, right? There are so many things that you can talk about when it comes to this environmental topic. So the module developers, who were secondary school teachers, both STEM teachers and non-STEM teachers, they created in such a beautiful way where they used the form of a court trial, where, they defended water. So there were 2 sides. The human, they were the accusers, right? They were committing the crime, and water was a person, in a way, defending themselves. So it was very interesting. It created awareness among the students about why we need to be careful about our water usage, and then what are some of the ways to prevent water pollutions, and also, in a way, think about already community-driven solutions to ensure that everyone is aware of environmental challenges related to water and rain. This one focused on temperature, and I remember we had 2 modules at the initial phase for temperature, where our educators were fascinated by so many challenges caused by temperature and couldn't decide, which one to focus on. Whether it should be the melting glaciers or different diseases caused by teachers. So in the end, they did a very interesting exercise and developed an interesting module where they talked about, collecting evidence, and then also exploring existing policies and actions under their municipalities' environmental office. And then they talked about different issues different issues related to temperature that has an impact on human health. And they also took an approach in terms of how these issues are related to, either deteriorating or advancing other sustainable development goals related to human health, especially Sustainable Development Goal 3, that's on health and well-being. And this module on solar radiation, it tackled, the importance of solar radiation for all lives on Earth, and focused on advantages and disadvantages of power to generate electricity. So, of course, as you can see, every module has a little bit of element where students were not only diving deep into the environmental topic, but actually using their problem-solving skills and coming up with solutions depending on the environmental topic. So for this one, they evaluated the options for setting up solar panels on a school campus. And the last one is on barometric pressure. So in this one, students, explored the environmental topic as atmospheric pressure and how it affects temperature, rainfall, and wind, really like all the weather conditions related to barometric pressure. And then, for this one, of course, it was a bit challenging what kind of solutions or what kind of environmental, ideas students can tackle, right? So they came up with an interesting idea where, in a way, they were introduced to the diverse job scope of a meteorologist, and then, what they can do today as a meteorologist to tackle different issues related to barometric pressure. So with that, hopefully you get to read more about the handbook, about these modules, and each module has different, elements where where the teacher talk about and reflect on their experience, as well as the process and key learning outcome for students. So now let's invite Adam to have a conversation. And when we are having this conversation, please, if you have any comments, if you have any questions, please feel free to raise your hand using the reaction button, and then you can then ask questions when we are having the conversation for each of these questions. So first of all, the module building process in a team with teacher colleagues, because that's something you are going to do as well during action learning phase. So Adam, could you share your experience with us? What was the team building process like for you, and what was the experience of working with teacher colleagues for your module was like for you?
Hello everybody, I'm really happy to be here, and I'm happy that I can share my experience with you. So as Jyoti has already said, our team was working on the wind phenomenon. Actually, in my team, there were 4 members, 2 teachers from Hungary, 1 from Slovakia, and myself. So we, of course, had at the very beginning an introductory online meeting. So we got familiar with the whole idea. We planned all our further steps. We decided also to keep in touch using various social media. So as you probably know, our project was a project among 4 European countries, Visegrad countries. It was Poland, Czech Republic, Hungary, and Slovakia. In Europe, the most common social media is Messenger, so we decided to set up a closed group on Messenger to be able to keep in touch with each other and to send information and exchange ideas using this group. But we also created a Google shared document. And during our first online meeting, we decided to put our ideas on this Google document so that everyone was able to follow the ideas of the other participants. We also used some other tools like Answer Garden for brainstorming and Mentimeter for collecting opinions. So I can tell you, even right now, we will be talking about recommendations later on, that it's good to have some, ways of keeping in touch so that everybody is informed all the time and everybody is updated all the time. As Jyoti has said, I was the leader of the team, but Adrian from Hungary helped me greatly, and she was always very supportive, and I always knew that I could rely on her support while managing our work. Finally, we designed some warm-up activities. So we decided that we would create 3 kinds of activities. The first ones were called warm-up activities, then core activities, and then closing fun tasks. We called them in this way. So the first warm-up activity was brainstorming vocabulary connected with wind. So students posted their associations with wind. Later, we decided to create a kind of a game using learning apps. So students created definitions using learning apps, and they played this game to be sure that they are familiar with some important terminology, phrases, words concerning wind. And we also created virtual visits to participating schools on Google Earth. In this way, we were able to see the surrounding of the school, and we could ask questions about the area where the school is located, etc. But these were introductory, as I said, warm-up activities. But then we had two core activities based on the weather stations. And Jyoti has already said a few words about them. So two most important ones. The first one was assessing if building wind farms in our region makes sense. So we collected data from the weather stations. We later analyzed data using the exploratory tool, and Josh will tell you about the exploratory tool in a moment. And we tried to assess if building a wind farm is a good idea, for example, in the region of my town. It turned out that it didn't make sense to build a wind farm in our region because the winds were not powerful enough. But for example, in Hungary, in one of the schools, it turned out that they could build a wind farm in their region, and that wind farm could produce energy for the area. Another problem we tackled in this phase was probably you know that in Central Europe we use coal as the main source of heating houses, especially in winter time, and it's a big problem, especially in big cities like Krakow, but it's even a big problem in my town, which is not very big, but in winter the air gets very polluted. So we decided to observe the wind directions in our city, because one part of my city is the district where lots of houses, detached houses, semi-detached houses are built. And we observed if the wind brings that polluted air to the center in the city. In this way, we wanted to predict days or to predict areas of risk for air pollution in our towns. I told you that we tried to finish with some fun tasks. We all agreed, I mean, all the teachers who worked in this team agreed that it would be lovely to finish with some entertaining activities for our students. For example, we listened to and discussed the meaning of wind of change. I'm sure you remember this song very well. We also discussed Gone with the Wind, famous film. Many sequels were made of this film, and we also talked about the role of wind in art, in poetry, in literature. So that's more or less everything as far as our work is concerned. So as I said, we posted our ideas on the shared document. Later we had discussions both on during online meetings, but also on the Messenger group, because as you know, sometimes it's quite difficult to arrange a suitable time for everybody. So sometimes it's better to conduct such discussions, such exchanges of ideas using, for example, Messenger, and people the participants can answer questions, they can comment on our ideas when they have some free time.
Thanks, Adam. I think you have already covered most part for also like how students participated, different stages. So could you highlight 2 key outcomes for students and 1 impact on your classroom learning environments that in a way had a very good impact within the regular school curriculum, that also took it, you know, the impact in a way influenced to take it beyond the regular school curriculum?
Yes, actually, as for the impact on the classroom, I think that there were more important, aspects that I'd like to highlight. The first one was experiential learning, hands-on approach. Being an English and history teacher, before that project, I had never used STEM, for example, and, analyzing data in my projects, because the projects I had done before that project were mostly concentrated on humanities, foreign languages, etc. But thanks to this project, I realized that even while teaching English, it's possible to use experiential learning when students collect, analyze data, when they make predictions, when they come up with solutions. That's a method used by scientists, and what's important, we solved real life problems with our students, and that's a very important aspect. We also used gamification. I've already told you about learning apps, about virtual visits using Google Earth. I think that the thing that had great impact on my classroom practices was interdisciplinary teaching. We had teachers of geography, physics, chemistry, biology, English teachers, of course. And in our case, in case of our team, the STEM project even changed into the STEAM project, because we also incorporated art. I told you that we used some elements from literature, music, etc. So I think it's possible and beneficial to combine didactic and entertaining activities, to create this positive atmosphere during the activities you conduct with your students. And we also took care of that. As for my students, so students acted as data analysts and scientists, so they could feel, the most important aspects of those occupations. They developed collaboration and communication skills. They took part in some online meetings. They took part in some messenger conversations as well. They developed also their personal and social responsibility for the work, which is connected with understanding global issues better. And that's, of course, connected with education for sustainable development. So we wanted to pay as much attention as possible to all that factors. They, of course, developed their digital and technical skills, and, of course, language skills. And I remember one situation when students worked as a team, and they had to come up with some solutions to a problem. And one of my students was the one who had to refer the problem to the other teams. After that meeting, she said that she was so happy to be able to present, the common work of the group to the other groups. Because she had never done such a thing before, and she had always been scared of doing public presentations. So it was a great experience for her to be able to do that. And thanks to that, she developed her self-confidence, which is also quite important, especially right now during the times after the pandemic.
Thank you, Adam. So I have one more question for you, but I think I'll come back to that. We will invite Josh shortly to, talk about data, as you just mentioned, experiential learning, right? And you talked about your students being data analysts. So what were they analyzing and what were they experiencing? So to explain that, and also to our teacher participants today, a glimpse of what they have, the platform they used, we invite Josh from who is from our EdTech partner Sciences Scope. So please, Josh, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that you can share yours if you are ready.
Yep. Hi, everyone. I'll just share my screen now. So as mentioned, my name's Josh, and I'm a software engineer at ScienceScope. I help develop the IoT environmental sensing devices, and also help to develop our online analysis platform. So I'm just going to share it now. Right, here we go. So this tool that we've developed here at ScienceScope is what we call our IoT Exploratory, which is a data analysis visualization tool for IoT data that could be any number of things, from weather stations, CO2 sensors, temperature sensors, and also quite recently the energy monitoring sensors, so we can start to actually monitor build-in usage of electricity and start to look at, how can schools and everything start to reduce their electricity. And like some things that Adam has said with the investigations we've done on previous projects is investigate, can local renewable energy sources be installed locally, such as wind turbines. So with the weather station, you can look at the wind speed, wind gust data, and start to analyze, is this a suitable location? And with the weather stations we also have what's called a solar radiation sensor that can measure the strength of the sun hitting a specific area. So with that data, you can start to work out in your location how efficient, how well will solar panels work. Depending on how much money you can invest in them will depend on how much energy you get from them. And with our energy monitoring sensors, you can then link that into, well, if I invested in a solar farm the size of an acre or something, how much energy would that give me? How much would that offset my current usage, and do all that kind of sort of stuff. So I'm just going to take you through an example that I've got built here. This is our exploratory tool, and we're just going to be looking at a school here in the UK, just south of London. So I'm just going to give you a bit of an idea of where it is located. So here we have a map, and you can see it's just on the southeast side of the UK, and it's just in the southeast side of London in this area here. So it's not in the city centre. It's still a relatively built up area, as you can see from some housing estates nearby, but there is some still quite open fields and other places around, and with the bit of the waterworks going through the middle, it is in a little bit on the side of a hill in a bit of a valley. Now, as discussed here, we were talking about what kind of sensors our platform can take in data from. So here we have a list of all of the sensors that, in this case, that we're building. We've got things like air temperature, we've got pressure, we've got CO2 sensors in the classroom. So CO2 is measuring the activity of how many people might be in a given area. And also CO2 is very important for creating good learning environments, in the sense that you don't want high CO2 levels in an enclosed area. As kids in your classroom, you might be thinking that they're yawning because they're bored or something like that, but actually it could be high CO2 levels are creating a bit of drowsiness. And we have found that in lots of past projects where actually schools, particularly in the UK, where they've been recently renovated with better insulation, actually don't have very good airflow at all, and we see extremely high levels where you will start to notice effects on pupils and teachers as well, with concentration levels. So we very much believe that CO2 is very important to monitor in classrooms, as a way of being able to make sure that the learning environment is not a stuffy, tricky environment to learn and concentrate in, and some of the effects that CO2 can have. As discussed as well, we've been measuring the power consumption of this building as well. So we've got the electricity load and a few other analysis that we do of post-processing of data. We also monitor things like light level. Having a correct light levels is monitored to be very good for students in a class. Too bright can cause issues, but also too dark can make it hard for some people to focus as well. Also measures things like rain as well. And we've got things like relative humidity. As discussed, we've got things like solar radiation, which was useful for looking into solar panel investment. Sound level as well, how noisy is the environment? And this could be, you know, is the classroom just quite noisy with kids' activities? You know, sometimes it is, or are there other external sources that are creating quite a loud, distracting environment? We've got things like temperature, which is measuring the inside temperature of things like classrooms, which is different from air temperature from the weather station. Things like UV index, our weather stations also do, which is important to look at what kind of factor of sunscreen you should use. So a high UV index means that the sun is very strong outside and you need to protect yourself. So we can also teach and educate from a health aspect here. You can look at, you know, particularly in the summer, you can look and go, right, this is a high UV index, you need to put on sunscreen. These are the issues that UV index at certain levels can have. And, you know, as we've just discussed as well, we've got wind speed, wind gust, and wind direction as well. So this is a small selection of some of the sensors that we have on offer, and this is just what we've got installed at a school here. So I'm just going to scroll down and just start showing some of the data and some of the analysis that we can do on this system. So I've built a week of data from Monday the 3rd of October all the way through till Sunday the 10th of October here. So this is a normal week at in the UK schools. This was before they went on half term. And you can see that we started to have some cold weather, you know, now that we're in autumn here, starting to work towards the winter months here in the UK. You can see that you kind of got this daily cycle most of the time, but you can see over the Tuesday and the Wednesday through to the bit on the Thursday, you can see that actually we had a very mild day here, which we will actually come back to and start to look at how the air temperature can affect the energy used in a school in regards to starting to need to heat the building. Got things like pressure, and here we have CO2 concentration. So this is where we can start to see, you know, what's kind of going on here. Now, the school that we were working with here, they've actually got a cafe on site, which they do also open during the weekends a little bit. And we've also put a CO2 sensor in one of the classrooms next door to the cafe as well. And you can start to see here the daily trends of the school activity, where you can see you've got these really low base readings where there's no one really in the school, as you can see from about 7 o'clock. But once it starts to get to 8 and 9 o'clock, you can see these CO2 levels start to go up quite high, up to nearly 1300 plus ppm. And again, you can see it on the next day, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday was some really, really high spikes here. So one of the things that happens with CO2, the more people you have in a room, you know, humans breathe in air, and one of the things that happens is you transfer the oxygen into your system and you breathe out the waste, which is carbon dioxide, which is some of the burnt energy that you've used. So humans in a confined area will be producing a lot of CO2. And this is where, if you don't have good ventilation, whether that's air recirculation system, or even, I know it sounds counterintuitive sometimes, but even in the winter, you do need to crack open a window sometimes, because it's like, yes, you might lose a bit of heat, but actually a CO2 level of 1680 ppm, which is reference to parts per million, you can start to have some side effects that can be measured of a bit of yawning, tiredness, and lack of concentration. So the UK government here recommends classrooms should actually be kept under 800 ppm, but they do allow occasional spikes above that. But on average, it should stay below. But you can see on this day here, for quite a long time, it was way above 800 ppm. for classes here, and the same on the Friday. You can see that, yes, when there's no classes, it is below, but actually once school is active, it's way above the UK government recommended. So this is where investigations are needed into what should the schools do differently to improve the learning environment for students. And some of the aspects to think about here when looking at the data is, why is the cafe most of the time recording much lower CO2 levels? Well, you need to look at kind of the density of the occupation of the room. So the cafe is a larger room, as you would expect, versus a classroom. So even though there might be more people in the cafe, it's a much larger area. So the person per square feet is lower in the cafe than in the classroom. And one of the other things to note here is, as I mentioned earlier, the cafe does also open on Saturdays. So you can see how there is a bit of a rise here in some CO2 levels on a Saturday. Now, the next thing I'm just going to show you here is what we are doing a lot with schools, is particularly the energy crisis, and also helping to reach some of the things that I discussed and was discussed as well in the first session, which was looking at the effects of climate change and how can you bring in climate change education into schools. And this is one of the tools in which how we do it. We start to monitor the energy usage. Now, this is the energy usage of the school throughout the week and looks at their load levels. Now, one of the first things that we talk about here at ScienceScope is the base load. So it's basically the lowest recorded energy that's always being used in a school. Now, this is quite key because this can really indicate your wastage and potential big savings, because even if you reduce this by 5 kilowatts over a 24/7 period, that can save you thousands and thousands of pounds in money, but also drastically reduce your CO2 emissions and everything like that. So you can kind of see here, you've got the spikes between Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And on Saturday, when the school wasn't very busy, when we go back up to CO2, you can see that the classroom wasn't active, but the cafe was. You can see that the energy usage has gone up a bit and then come back down to normal on Sunday. You can, from the data here, we can make the assumption that the school was mostly closed on the Sunday. Basically, there might have been a couple people in, but actually overall it was not open to the public or had any students in there. Now, some of the things that we can start to do on this system is we can start to compare different sensor data. So we can start to look at, well, how can the occupancy affect the energy, what's going on? Is the energy being used at sensible times, dependent on when people are using the school? So what we can do here, we can look at our electricity load. So this is the load that's currently being used. And we can add a second axis, and we're going to add CO2 concentration. So what we now have here is a graph with two y-axis. We've got still the electricity load in kilowatts on the left here. And now on the right, we've got our CO2 concentration in ppm. And what we can see here is how the energy load is coming on at around 7 o'clock in the morning, which looks like it's on a timer most days. 6:30 to 7. And you can then see how the school actually becomes active at around 9 o'clock. So when you look at the first start of rising of the CO2 data, you can see it's at 9 to 9:30 by hovering over what's going on. We have this nice tool where we can toggle spike lines, so you can actually see and line up some of the correlations. So you can see at 9:30 here, you've got some quite high energy usage, which is actually when the CO2 starts to spike. And it's the same on quite a few days here. Once CO2 starts to spike at around 9, 10 o'clock, you can start to work out, what's going on with the energy usage. Now, there's some of the things that this data shows here is that actually, there's quite a delay. There's a couple of hours delay between their spikes in their energy and their CO2 usage. Now, some of the things looking at here is, obviously, as everyone knows, it can take a while to heat the house up. So you can't just necessarily start your heating when the building, when people start occupying it. There's the decision of energy consumption versus the comfort levels of your occupants. So, what do you do? Do you turn everything on, kind of get it ready and nice for everyone, or do you turn it on once people start to arrive? Because the amount of heat that people can produce in a room as well can drastically warm up a room, and what electronic devices, particularly with a lot of the technology used in education now in a room, you talk in numerous computers, projectors, TV screens, all these things produce heat. And actually some of the things that we've noticed before is that actually you can heat a building up before anyone's in there and any of the technologies being used up to your maybe desired temperature of 20, 21 degrees. But then after that, you actually then start trying to cool the room because everyone's warmed it up. So we've had discussions with some projects we're running with universities about, well, actually, do you accept that the first half an hour to an hour might be slightly colder and uncomfortable for occupants because actually you're using a lot of their energy to kind of warm up and produce heat into the building? And that's some of the things that we can start to look at with this data. So one of the things we can start to experiment with is actually we can say to the school, actually, we think you should start turning your heating on later. You can see that by the time people start coming in, it's 9 o'clock, but you're getting things going at 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. You've got nearly 2 hours of time when you're using a lot of electricity when actually no one's in the school. So why didn't you shift that? And as you can also see here is, we can see why this energy has spiked here because the CO2 level has also risen. So it kind of shows usage here. Now, one of the other things that you can start to note here is looking at correlation. So what might be causing this spikes in some of the energy? Now, what we can see here is on the Monday, you've got quite a high spike up to nearly 60 kilowatts, and same 55 odd on the Friday, and a little bit less again, 53 on the Thursday. But it's quite a bit lower on the Tuesday and the Wednesday. So it's very much, well, why might the energy be lower? And one of the things we can then plot is the air temperature. Now, as I showed you at the start, I mentioned that, well, we had a couple of quite mild days here where you can see the air temperature here didn't really drop off at night. It was a very warm night. And as a result, you can see to probably warm up the building, which we'll look at with the internal temperature in a moment, you can see how a lot less energy was used as a result of that the external temperature was warmer. So this is where you can start to investigate and correlate, well, what can cause energy usage? What are the impacts? What are the environmental impacts that can kind of drive the difference in energy usage targets and also comfort levels? And that's just some of the examples there that you can kind of start to work on and see, well, what's kind of going on. And again, as I mentioned, we can then turn off air temperature and we can actually add the internal temperature here. One of the things we do with our data, which is why these graphs sometimes look a bit funny, is we're looking at data every 30 minutes, but we gather data every 5 minutes, and we process that data to show the min, max, and average for the 30-minute interval. So we can see how much the temperature varies within the 30 minutes. So what's interesting, it looks like there is some sort of cooling going on here, but just to keep things kind of simple, not go into too much detail, I'm just going to remove the min and the max. So this is where you can start to correlate, what's going on with the energy usage. So you can see that on the Monday, from the Sunday, you can see the temperature down here has dropped off quite steeply. It's gone down to 19.6 degrees, 19.2 degrees between the cafe and the classroom. And then you can see it starts to rise up really quickly as they're turning on their energy. And you can see that actually the delay between when they start to turn on and start to consume a lot of their power, that it takes a while for the temperature to rise up by the time that actually once they've got maybe their desired temperature of like 20, 21 degrees, that they then actually have their heating turned off. So you can see that the school in sometimes can take a while to warm up. But what you can see here in the much more milder days where we had, as we saw, the much warmer weather externally, you can see how the temperature only dropped off to around 20 degrees versus 19 degrees. And as a result, warmed up much quicker because it was already much warmer, closer to the target. It was warmer outside as well. So the inefficiencies of the building with the draftiness was having less of an effect. So, and you can see that kind of the same kind of patterns throughout the day. And what we try and get is students to look at this data and go, you know, what's going on here? What do you think is going on? We ask them questions. We kind of, depending on the ability levels of students and what age groups you're working with, you can really pick and choose as to how much information you give them versus what kind of questions you ask. So you might say, oh, you know, why did it take so long to warm up? You know, was it colder? Or some students might just say, you know, what's the difference here between here? And depending on your level is where you can go from there. And one of the main things that we are starting to work on is working out with students is to getting them to also do the investigations themselves. So like on the previous project, you know, working out, you know, was solar farms a viable option? You know, in one location, no, because of the wind. In one location, yes. It's the same thing that we're also trying to do now with some of the energy monitoring. Is this school is always consuming at minimum something like 13.6 kilowatts. Now that's equivalent to nearly 7 electric heaters on all the time. And this is at, you know, midnight, you know, 1:30 in the morning. You know, why is there the equivalent of 7 electric heaters on? So one of the things you can get your students to do, and one of the things we've done is we provide a worksheet and we take notes of what room, and we basically say, well, what devices are plugged in, what devices are left on, what devices are on standby, and what devices are turned off. And then as a further project, depending on, you know, as I've discussed, you know, the ability, whether you're doing primary, secondary, or something like sixth form, also whether you're, you know, the ability of the students, you can then get them to do research with, you know, looking online, even without having to buy, you know, technology and sensors, of going, well, how much energy do you think these devices are consuming while they're on? How much energy do you think they're consuming on standby? And from there, you can start to total up and work out, well, you know, what's being left on, you know, what is it? And one of these schools, when we first started monitoring them over nearly a year ago now, we got these energy monitors installed before Christmas. And we found out that actually over the Christmas period, they left their heating running on a normal schedule. They didn't turn it off or put it onto like a reduced cycle. And all of the admin areas were left on as well, like all of their lights were left on. So we could see from the light sensors and the energy monitoring circuits that the admin area was consuming about 5 kilowatts, even throughout Christmas when no one was in there, with things like computers, all sorts of, you know, technology and devices left on that just really did not need to be on, and plus the heating coming on. And, you know, the school had no idea that that was happening until we go, well, look, here's the data. And they then had to adjust it and fix it to make sure there's not that wastage again. And we find this quite often with a lot of schools that we work with, is that they have no idea that these things happen because there's no way to look and analyze and look at the data of what's going on. You know, if no one's in the school to notice, why is it still warm on, you know, Christmas Day in the school when no one's there, because no one's there to notice that it's warm. So this is the power of what some of the data and tools and things that we can do can bring to the classroom, really. And some of the other things, like Adam has been discussing with some of the past projects, that you can do with the weather station. So just bringing into the wind speed here, you know, over this week at times it might have been suitable to have a wind turbine nearby, but actually you can see on some days it's also extremely calm, and other days it's not particularly windy. You need a very good kind of constant wind for any sort of decent wind turbine. But if we find our solar radiation sensor, that's sorry
for interrupting, Josh. Just looking at the time.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah. So I'll just finish off with the solar radiation. So you can see that actually a solar panel investment would be worthwhile. Even in October, in these autumn months, there's still some, you know, 600 watts per meter squared of energy hitting the surface. If you think what their energy load is with 14 kilowatts, that's not a massive amount of solar panels that you would need to actually offset that usage. So this is some of the things that you can do with data, some of the analysis tools that can be done.
Thank you, Josh. So now you have seen how, data was used as a tool in the V4IoT project to make the STEM teaching and learning real world driven. And our participants really had a lovely experience, both teachers and students working with ScienceScope. So if any of you, we designed this project a bit differently, but if any of you independently want to work with ScienceScope and want to make your STEM teaching and learning data driven, I think we can get in touch with Josh. So Josh and David. So let's move on with what we were discussing earlier. So now we have heard from Josh about the, how data can be used to make STEM teaching and learning in a way exploratory and then interdisciplinary and also real world driven. Hope that gave you a little bit of idea how STEM teaching and learning can be in a way taken place in an investigative process and also contribute to sustainable development. And now maybe Adam, if you could quickly in 2 to 3 minutes summarize what were the key challenges during the V4IoT project as you were developing the modules, and what would you have done differently for better coordination, efficiency, and result? And what advice, maybe one advice that you would give to our teacher participants today as they embark on the action learning phase to do something similar, not with the weather station, but something similar. So please.
As for the challenges, so I think that for us, the biggest challenge was the COVID-19 pandemic. The whole project, of course, it was an online project, but during the first phase of the project, I couldn't meet my students at school, so I couldn't work with them in the classroom. We had to do everything online, so it was quite demanding. I must say that it was sometimes difficult to pack the project tasks into the school curriculum. So we solved it in this way that students had some additional project hours of work and they did some things at home. Of course, the problem was with time, lack of time. Our project was really intense. We planned lots of activities. We had many things to do. And my recommendation for you here is to plan activities reasonably. I think it's much better to work on a smaller number of tasks instead of on a big number of tasks. And to get deeper insight into some problems, into some issues. It's better to make students understand the problem better instead of dealing with a big number of issues and problems. As for other recommendations, I think that communication is vital. That's what we wanted to establish in our group. So frequent meetings, online meetings, but also communication on social media like Messenger. I've already told you about that. In this way, we built good relationships with the other members of the team and people become more active and supportive towards each other. And I think that that's really important. When somebody posts an idea, it's always good to comment on it, to add your thoughts, to add your ideas. And in this way, the whole work progresses. Of course, things like setting clear and achievable objectives, that's something obvious, and also define clear roles and responsibilities. I was the leader of the team, but as I've told you, Adrian has helped me greatly in that project, and I really appreciate that. And it was great that we worked together and, made the work progressing. And the last thing I think is team dynamics. So knowing your team first will be a kind of a thing that will help you tackle with problems quickly with good feedback. So taking care of communication, being active, supportive, paying attention to relationships. These are the things that we should take into consideration while planning such work.
Thank you, Adam. So with this, congratulations, you have successfully completed the self-learning phase. So as Adam just mentioned, good team building, right? Good communication, good relationship within the team. That's what we are going to do through exercise and through collaboration during the 2 peer-to-peer learning sessions. So thank you so much to our speakers today, Adam and Josh, for really walking you through the various stages and also sharing their experience, and also showing the elements that were used during the project that made those modules real world driven. So if any of you have any questions, please think about your questions when I'm introducing, looking at the time. So this is quite important. So let me quickly introduce you to our next session. So we will, we are really excited to start the team learning phase next week on 8th of November. And of course, the host and moderators for those sessions will be the ASF ClassNet team, us, and your lovely ASF ClassNet collaboration to facilitators. I saw Alexia is already here, and John Yu. So they will be also your host and moderators for the team learning session. And please look out for the e-learning platform in announcement section. We have already shared a link. Please complete this identity envelope exercise. Why you are doing this, you will know more during the first peer-to-peer session. We will explain the rationale for doing this exercise. However, within the form, within the link, you will see already instructions for doing the exercise. And then here is an example from our e-learning platform. So you can see here, I just posted it today. So if you click on the link, then it will take you to do the exercise. So with that, now let's go back to Adam's questions now. So if any of you have any questions that you would like to ask Adam or Josh, please, now is your chance. So if you need any feedback, or if you want to ask any questions about, when he was sharing his experience, if you have any burning questions about team building, or, the ideation for action learning phase, anything that you can think of right now. I see that everybody is quiet.
Hello, Jyoti.
Yes.
Let me ask how many or what is the duration of this project? If we're going to make our collaborative work for this project, what is the duration of this project?
Yes.
Thank you.
So if you looked into the program, you'll see that every phase is divided into how many weeks. So team learning is 2 weeks, self-learning is about over a month, and then action learning phase is actually about 4 weeks. So after you complete the team learning phase that starts next week, so it will be 2 weeks. So first session, second session, so 2 weeks of peer-to-peer and team building. And then action learning phase, it will be 1 month. So let's say it will be about 1 month, where by first 2 when we work on the team learning phase during the 2 peer-to-peer sessions, you'll be already put into teams. You will already know who you are going to be working with. And then you will already be participating by then in several team building exercises. Like this one is the first one, identity envelope exercise. And then we will explain what's going to be your key roles and what are the key contributions we are asking for. Of course, you already know it's an innovative teaching practice per team. And how you decide to meet, how you decide to, conduct your team building, it's totally up to you. It's completely up to you. However, Alexia and John and the ASF ClassNet team will be, there to support you, and will be explaining these expectations and what is the capacity in terms of mentoring, in terms of providing you support during the first peer-to-peer session. Does that answer your question? Okay, perfect. Anybody? I think we are, we are almost at the end of the session. So if nobody has any questions, I think.
I have maybe a small one.
Of course, go ahead.
Yeah. Just actually, I wanted to ask Josh, because I find this data analysis very interesting. I'm not, I mean, I'm a math teacher, but not really science. And my question was like, to have all those data, did you ask the school, or did you have to buy some, some sensors to look at the CO2 and all that to collect the data and make the graphs? Or normally, do you have it, I mean, does it come already with the invoices, or you had to build special sensors to then read them and collect the data?
Yeah, so the sensors that we have installed in the school are something that ScienceScope have developed. So as part of the project was funded as part of the local council. So the local council paid for the sensors and paid for us to help them with the analysis. So that's kind of where the costs are. But one of the things in the UK is they have smart meters. So one of the things we've actually done in a past school where we haven't actually installed any sensors yet, we've looked at their energy usage historically. We've asked their energy supplier to give us their usage, which they're meant to record. And then you can still, in some aspects, look at energy monitoring with historic usage without actually having to buy any kit.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you, Josh. Does anybody else have any questions? Okay, so with this, congratulations again for successfully completing the self-learning phase. And then we are excited to start the team learning phase with you next week. So please check out the learning platform. We will be also sending an email tomorrow. Please complete this identity envelope exercise. Try to be as authentic and honest as you can when you do this exercise. And with that, have a very lovely afternoon in I think it's already, yeah, it's still morning in Europe. So afternoon in Asia and morning in Europe. Thank you, everybody.